You're listening to the Make Life Epic podcast with Jim Simcoe. Thanks for being here today. Let's get rolling with the show. Hey everybody, welcome to the Make Life Epic podcast. I am so freaking stoked about our guest today. She is awesome. Dr. Jenn Gunsaullus. She is a sociologist, a sexologist. She talks about sexual empowerment, healthy relationships, blah, blah, blah. Sexual health, mindful sex. She's done a bunch of TED Talks, and her stuff is just fantastic. And I know her because we served on the same board of directors for Genes for Justice for a couple of years. And she's one of the nicest people you'll ever meet. And when she has a party at her house or a board meeting at her house, she's smart enough to know to put out tons and tons of snacks. So welcome to the show, Dr. Jenn. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me.
Oh, are you kidding me? I'm so stoked to have you on the show. It's fantastic. I was the other day I was like, God, I want to have another guest on. And I've been thinking about you for a while and saying like, God, I should ask her if she wants to come on. And I just, for whatever reason, just never did. And I was like, I'm going to call her and see if she can do it. So I'm so stoked to have you here. So can you tell everyone a little bit about yourself, what your work is, and who are you? Who is Dr. Jenn?
Who is Dr. Jenn?
Yes.
Dr. Jenn is pretty similar to Jen.
Okay, good.
I really don't compartmentalize anything in my life. It's all kind of me through everything that I do. But I'm originally from Pennsylvania, suburbs of Philadelphia.
And are you a big Villanova fan? Because I just won the championship the other night.
Villanova. Yeah. Philadelphia, it's hard not to grow up a sports fan. So sure. I still follow some of the Philly sports teams. Yeah.
Good.
I was a big Flyers hockey fan in middle school and high school. And
unbelievable.
Yeah. The doctor part of Dr. Jenn is my PhD in sociology. I have a specialty in sex and gender. And that's when I really started getting into sexual health education. That's actually as an undergrad. And so that's how I got into the sex-related, gender-related topics. And overall, what I do is I have a private practice, which is odd as a sociologist, but it's my own version of coaching, counseling, education with couples and individuals. I do a lot of public speaking from,
Your videos are insane. Your YouTube videos are fantastic. And I will put in the show notes don't worry, everybody. I will put in the show notes how to find Dr. Jenn because You got to check out her videos. They're just, I was literally laughing out loud just in how awesome they are. They're definitely funny, but they're just so instructive and so educational, but they're presented in such a heartwarming way. It's just fantastic.
Yeah, I'm a silly person. And I like to wear costumes and things like that. So I like to have real conversations about serious topics, but in non-threatening, non-judgmental, non-shaming ways. So I try to bring that approach to all of my work, to all of my life. But definitely all of my work. And so, I have over 200 videos on my In the Den with Dr. Jenn video series and done 2 TEDx talks about female sexuality and shame and mindfulness.
Which are huge. You cannot turn on, not that I would ever watch the news, but you can't turn on any kind of social media without hearing something about one of those topics. And I just think what you're doing is really cool. So
thank you. It's become really, I just in the past year or two, there's been a big, just around a lot of the big social topics, particularly around sexism and racism. Social media has exploded with that in the past 2 years, in particular, I would say, and just a much greater awareness and less acceptance for intolerance and all the bullshit around it.
Yeah, totally. That's the best part. You swore before I did, which means I get to swear a lot more. I love it when the guest swears more than
that makes me very happy.
Yeah, I'm very pro swear. Very, very pro swear.
You know what? I just saw a post on Facebook yesterday that apparently people who swear more are more intelligent.
See?
So there you go.
Clearly.
I know.
Clearly that's the case. Although anybody looking at me right now and with what I'm wearing right now and the baggy shorts and t-shirt I'm wearing, they'd be like, maybe not that guy, but
so much.
Yeah, I think all right, so listen, let's back up. So you grew up in Philly, you're a Pennsylvania girl, it's fantastic. Yep. Tell me about your favorite high school teacher. Who was your favorite high school teacher and where'd you go to high school? What was Dr. Jenn like in high school?
Oh my gosh. Well, so I went to Great Valley High School in Malvern, Pennsylvania, like a small town, probably about 45 minutes outside of Philadelphia.
Okay.
I definitely grew up a good girl.
Yeah.
I mean, what I do now is such a far cry from my upbringing. I was raised Catholic.
What's your family think about it?
They are fantastic. I am
Awesome.
so lucky. I mean, because I was raised with, I guess, more kind of conservative mainstream values. But clearly my parents, but my sister is a couple years older than me. My parents, they weren't feminists or anything like, or even particularly liberal when I was growing up. Yet did a fantastic job of just instilling my sister and I with confidence in ourselves and just to be really well-rounded.
That's so cool. I think that's so important for girls. I mean, I have 2 girls, as you know.
Yeah.
And by the way, that's like the 4th time I've interrupted you. And so you need to catch up and interrupt me more often, because this is a big show about intro. I should call this show the Make Life Epic, but if you're starting to talk about something, someone will probably interrupt you.
But let me talk about me first.
Yeah, exactly. But I have 2 daughters, and I think that's so key, because the world is so crazy with this stuff.
Do they play sports?
No, I think they know how to spell the word sports, but God has a sense of humor, because he gave me 2 daughters who have no interest in sports at all. Oh, Kaya, my oldest daughter, who I think you may have met one time, she's going to be 11 in June. She is very much into like the creative arts. She loves to write. She loves to make videos. She's very dramatic.
That's awesome.
My youngest daughter, Noah, who just turned 7, is built like an athlete. Like she's lean and strong, and she can run forever, but she has no interest in it. And she's incredibly obstinate, like her dad. And just like, if I could get her into a sport, she'd just absolutely kill it. But I just can't find a sport that she's willing to do.
Yeah, I mean, if she's got enough of the inkling towards it, it seems like there must be something out there. You just haven't maybe found it yet. Has it clicked with her? Because I think for my sister and I think that was huge. Both of us started at the time back in Pennsylvania. The only option was soccer, and thank goodness we had that as an option. Yeah. So we both started at age 8 playing sports and organized sports, and I think that was just huge for both of us. And I say that now. I'm 43 now, and I am actually.
You're not 43.
I am.
Are you really?
Yeah.
I thought you were a lot younger than that. Not that that's old. I just turned 46. That's not old.
No, it's not, great. But it is weird. It sounds old. It
does, right?
Both of them.
How about this? So when I turned 46, I was in my CrossFit class. And so I talk about CrossFit all the time. So one of the coaches, Blake, he stopped the class. He said, "All right, I have a big announcement." And he goes, "Jim just turned 46. And everyone was like, starts clapping. And everyone starts saying congratulations. Like it's a big deal that I got to 46. Like, you don't say congratulations to somebody turning 20. Right. Why is it when you go over 40, people are like, "Oh, congratulations. We didn't think you were going to make it this far."
I know. And you're like, I'm still way below the life expectancy average. Why are you doing that?
I walk around. I don't need any help from anybody else. Calm down. All right, so you're 46. Unbelievable.
Well, no, I was going to say just the athletics and the importance of that. And for me, I am in a week and a half, I will be testing for my black belt in Subak Do.
Wow, cool.
Body. Yeah, I've been doing it for the past 3.5 years, and I'm in an intense 6-week training right now, specifically leading up to black belt testing.
Oh, good for you. That's so cool.
It's kick my ass mentally and physically, but the athleticism, the confidence I have in my body, the community around it, the mind-body connection, the mindfulness, the challenge, all aspects of that. It's just a continuation of just being. I mean, because I think as women, we get so many media messages to dislike our bodies and how it looks, or there's something wrong with us sexually, or just something to hate ourselves and just ourselves. And there's just so much about sports and athletics that really help us appreciate.
Yeah, totally.
The strength, so the flexibility, and just challenging our bodies in ways about the functioning and appreciating it in that way. And it's not about what we look like. So
really you're a PhD, you're a sociologist, a sexologist with a black belt almost.
Not yet. I'm so
Like, who dates you? Like, what guy is ever gonna cut like that?
That is a continuing problem for me.
My God. Talk about setting the bar high. Jesus.
Well, and then on top of it, I work really hard to practice what I preach. And so I am all about communication, owning my shit.
I'm gonna find you a guy.
Okay.
That's awesome.
Thank you.
All right. So let's go back to
I'm an entrepreneur, and but it is, I don't know. I work hard to be like a really good person in the world and very well-rounded.
And you're a
And
great person.
thank you. And it's actually, I do have trouble dating and finding folks that I feel like are, I guess, well matched for me in a lot of different ways.
Huh.
So
Interesting.
yeah,
All right.
if you have any options, let me know.
I definitely will. I definitely will. All right. So tell us a little bit more about who you work with and what specifically do you help them with? You mentioned you have a private practice. What does that entail and what's that all about?
Yeah. So, I mean, I get individuals and couples. The youngest I've worked with is 18, actually probably 17. The oldest I've ever worked with is 82.
Wow.
And so, yeah, I'm always like, may we all be sexual, into our 80s and older.
Hey, buddy, if I can remember my name when I'm in my 80s, I'm going to be stuck.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's true too. Yeah. And so I'd say primarily the main kind of focus areas I have, the main number one thing I have is heterosexual couples that have been together for a while. They're in a long-term relationship and they now have mismatched desire levels. That's
Interesting.
Number one thing I work with. I would say that's my main specialty area. And while, and so in the beginning of the relationship, both of them felt high desire and passion usually, and it was exciting and it was hard to keep your hands off each other. And then after, a year, 2 years, whatever, then we hit, that those natural neurochemicals die off. And so often it is the male that still wants sex and the physical connection more than the female, although I have seen it the opposite way.
We're very simple people, Jen. We're very simple people.
It's so interesting.
We are the simplest people in the world.
I know. I every few months I'm still shocked by that.
By how simple men are? Yeah, I get it. I'm a guy.
Well, and I mean, female sexuality, female sexual empowerment is my specialty area. And female sexuality, in so many ways, is so complex.
Right.
And I love the complexity of it. I love the layers. I love the nuances. And that's actually one of the things I often do in my practice is help translate that. Because for women, we just know it because we live it and we get frustrated. We feel like men trivialize us or don't understand or don't care or put everything into a black and white. And we feel just, not heard, not understood or shamed or blamed around sexuality. And so I do a lot of, and then men think that women are just being difficult or gatekeepers or, not appreciating them. And so I do a lot of communicating between the genders because we are socialized to be so different sexually. And so, I translate those differences and be like, you know what? He's not trying to be an asshole. She's not trying to be crazy. Like we really just are different.
That's great.
Because once we can stop blaming each other, then we actually have a space that we can move forward and do something different and hopefully heal and grow. So
That's awesome. So what are some of the biggest, along those lines? So would you say the biggest issues you see with people or you help people with is that different levels of desirable?
I'd say, yeah. I mean, that's in my practice. I think that's one of the, as Americans that still really emphasize monogamy and marriage and long-term relationships with one person that way. And that belief that one person, we're not only are they supposed to be our best friend, but our lover, and we're supposed to love them through and through, and we're supposed to create a family, and we're supposed to live together, and we're supposed to economically join together, and we're supposed to have the same values. And like, that's crazy. That's so much to put on somebody. And you might find somebody who does match a lot of those things or is good to have a family with, but that definitely does not mean you're going to have sexual passion. Everything else can be great. I have couples that come to me and they have fantastic relationships and really good communication, but the desire and the passion just isn't there either for one of them or both of them.
So what do you do?
So a lot of,
give us the answers to the test. How, or I shouldn't even say that. If you can answer that, great. But is that a problem that's solvable?
It is. So yes. However, first of all, I have to help people reframe things because there's this one couple I worked with a while ago and he had this realization the one time. He's like, he goes, I'm like wanting sex based on a 1 to 10 on the porno meter. He goes, I need a completely different gauge for sexual excitement now. And I was like, yes. And so if if your only gauge of 1 to 10 of sexual excitement is what you know in the beginning of a relationship, you're going to probably continually be disappointed in a long-term relationship. If you could shift it and alter it and be like, okay, so that like hot, like quickly passionate, exciting, over the top, could do this for hours, that both of you feel that level of excitement and connection, you know, that might happen every once in a while, but you really need to reframe and be like, okay, what is it to have sex and passion that's based on love, on commitment, on stability, on a slow simmer? And then within that, trust and communication with each other, then how do you slowly start introducing new things? How do you bring in a little power play, maybe? How do you bring in your senses in new ways? How do you surprise your partner in new ways? How do you switch things up? How do you start exploring their bodies in new ways? Try new positions. You know, add senses, take senses away. Like there's so many different components of what we can do to add a little bit of surprise to it that kicks in those neurochemicals again.
That starts opening up.
Yeah, because the main thing that happens is you know this person so well through and through. And I would say a lot of men, once they find something that works, they stick with it. They're like, why would I change this if this works?
We are simple people, Jen.
And most women, not all, but many women, need things to change up, need things to shift. It can't be so linear and goal oriented, or they're just going to be bored. It's not engaging their mind. It's not engaging their hearts. It's not engaging their genitals. So we need things that kick in those endorphins and that dopamine and those neurochemicals. So there's lots of different ways to do that. But I mean, that would be the first conversation I'd have, even just like, what is desire?
So you're looking at desire from the sense of how we might look at it. And I do think that in society, as a guy, like you're like, sexuality is thrown upon you everywhere you go. Like, I mean, you have, I'll use a simple example of, so I'm super into sports. So I go to sportsillustrated.com every day, and they have a whole section on the swimsuit issue. And it's gotten, I mean, I remember when I was a kid, when I was 18, seeing the swimsuit issue, I was like, man, this is just fantastic. What a wonderful world. Thank you, God, for publishing this wonderful magazine. So I don't have to, look at the Sears catalog by myself anymore. So that's one thing, but it's so sexualized now, and it's all about like the body paint, and all these women, they're not real women in the sense that they have these bodies that they're not even fake. They're just improbable, right? Like, it's just not probable that you're ever going to see somebody like this. And they kind of set that as the standard. And that's one of the things I worry about for my daughters is like, if they start seeing this stuff as like, and they think that's the standard, like, it's horrible. It's horrible. It's absolutely horrible.
I use the word insidious because that is body image and a certain, appearance, and being very thin and being white and having hair a certain way and teeth and all of that is, and particularly around weight, particularly for mainstream Americans, it is insidious how that gets planted in like the center of each girl and young woman in our society, and so attached to their sense of self-worth.
Oh, that's horrible.
It's insidious. Because even, and I know, I mean, I would say of all, as athletic as I am and as healthy as I am and as much of a feminist and educated as I am, body image stuff still fucks with my head. And
that's crazy because you're a good looking woman.
Thank you. Yeah. And I live in Pacific Beach in San Diego,
oh, you live in
and I play beach volleyball almost every Saturday. Yeah. And it's like, it's a skewed image for sure in this area of the country, worse than other areas of the country. But don't you
always think, so I have a friend who's from Maine, and we were walking down the street the other day. We were just like kind of joking. And I was telling him, I'm like, dude, you're a pretty good looking dude. And he was saying, well, yeah, he's like, I'm an okay looking dude. And there's a backstory. I wasn't just like, hey man, you're really good looking. We were just something else. But he's like,
something.
Yeah, he's like, well, I'm in Southern California. So in Southern California, I'm like a 4. He's like, but if I go back to Maine, I'm the best looking guy in the whole town. There's no one who looks as good as me.
Yeah, no, it is. It's very, very skewed here.
Yeah.
We got the young and the beautiful in San Diego. So
what would you say? What are some of the biggest now I've got some interesting questions for you. So what are some of the biggest misconceptions about sex that we all have? What are some of the things that you see in your practice or that you've seen in your work that we're just a lot of times just completely wrong about?
Well, some of what we've been talking about, that it's simple and that it's easy, or it should be simple and it should be easy if you love each other. And that desire should always be there if you really love each other. So, I mean, everything we've been talking about, I think, are some of the biggest misconceptions. And I do think they are based more on a male version of sexuality. And not that men don't have their struggles, not that men don't have their performance concerns and erection concerns and body image and size and all those different things. But still, overall, I do think it's more a male version of sexuality. And if you're heterosexual and you want to be with a woman, that's going to be problematic, probably. So I also think, not about misconceptions, but we have so much shame and embarrassment around sex and just our bodies.
Right.
As Americans, we're so shitty about just being okay with naked bodies. There's so much shame just about nudity, and that nudity is immediately attached to sexuality instead of just like, I always use this example because I got to do a training at Lund University in Sweden about 4 years ago on to their sexual health peer educators, and just talking to folks there and just how they're raised so differently. And this one young woman was telling me it's really normal for Swedish families to go on vacation together and to skinny dip. And that's totally normal. And it's not, but like in America, people would be
never happen.
Yeah, they judge them. They would be like, "What's wrong with you? That's inappropriate." And it's inappropriate because we think nudity equals sexuality.
Right. It's funny you said it, because I had a guest on here recently, this author, Mark Haskell Smith, who is just, man, this guy is the best. He's the best writer I know besides Hemingway, and Hemingway's dead, and so he couldn't be on the show. But Mark is just fantastic. And he wrote this book, and it's called Naked at Lunch, and he talks about like the world, like the world of nudists, or however you say it, and he talks about being in somewhere in Europe and doing that, where like there's a town that it's either near Sweden or somewhere around there, where they go naked a lot and has nothing to do with sex. It's just part of their deal.
That's awesome. And look how far we are away from that we think breastfeeding babies in public.
That's the dumbest thing. Like, honestly.
Yeah, but it's exactly connected to that.
It's so stupid.
Breasts are sexual and people are uncomfortable with them, and therefore we should shut those women down from feeding their babies in public. It's mind-boggling how stupid we are as a country sometimes.
What I don't get about that, I mean, that argument, the breastfeeding argument in public is so stupid in so many levels. But one thing I definitely don't get about it is, like, if these real conservative people who are super anti-breastfeeding and they see breasts as a sexual object, well, wouldn't they just want to see them more often? So wouldn't breastfeeding be like, okay, because they'd be like, well, I can, it's available. It just doesn't make any sense to me.
It's a perfect example of if you look at the shadow aspect around sexuality, which is the stuff that we're ashamed of, we're embarrassed of, we judge harshly. And, I would say, right, the people that speak out the loudest against gay marriage, just gay rights, even, adultery, all different aspects of things like that, are the people that have probably the biggest shadow aspects around their own sexuality. They're so uncomfortable with it. They don't know what to do. And therefore, anytime those feelings come up, they often project it outward and just want to blame and control other people because it makes them feel better. And I think that's a part of what it is, because then they see a breast, they're like, I know I shouldn't be turned on by that, or that's inappropriate because I have a wife, or, oh, that's a baby, yet I'm being turned on by it. They're uncomfortable with that because we suck around, acceptance of our normal sexual feelings.
Yeah.
And then they don't know what to do with it, and they don't know what to do with that discomfort, and want to blame other people for it and like redirect it that way. That's my theory on that.
So crazy. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. All right. So what do you think, based on what you've said thus far in your work, what are the biggest keys to a great sex life? And everyone's going to skip to this part of the podcast. So anyway, everyone, this is Dr. Jenn Gunsaullus. Our first question is, what are the biggest keys to a great sex life? Welcome to the podcast.
Well, and what's so funny is like that's such a it's such a man question that you're asking.
I'm all man, woman. That's me.
You're like, can we just have something and make this really black and white so we can just fix all of this?
We are a simple, not only are we a simple gender, I am the prototypical simple gender example.
Well, so you might not love my answer because
if I don't like your answer, I'm just gonna edit it out. I'm totally kidding. I'm not gonna.
I like to give very nuanced answers because I don't think most things are not black and white. So, okay, what comes to mind is one, being creative, and I already mentioned that before. But think outside the box. I use this example. I had this. I was so excited about this talk. I got to speak at the end of February at Syracuse University to 1,000 sorority women in this huge auditorium about women and hookup culture. It was fantastic. It was just, I was so happy doing it. And I got to, talk about the risks behind it and how some people say it's liberated and how it's liberating. And then I got to talk about how we're really asking the wrong questions. And we need to be looking at a much bigger approach to sexuality. And I use the analogy of how we really do approach sex as baseball in our society. And I had an image on the PowerPoint of a baseball field, and you start at home and you hope to get to first base and second base and third base and home run, or do you strike out? Right. Are you a batter or a pitcher? And there's just so many analogies around that. And I said, and it's very linear and it's very based on social norms and expectations and assumptions that there's a right way of doing things. So in terms of a great sex life, I said to them, and I'm like, what happens if you go backwards around the bases? What happens if you run crazy in the outfield? What if you run up in the bleachers? What if you go outside? Think outside the box. I mean, it literally is a box or a diamond, the baseball diamond.
Right.
Like, think outside of that. Recognize that we are so trained that sex needs to go in a specific way, and that limits all of us. So I encourage people to take a holistic approach of looking at, look at the physical components of knowing your body and knowing your partner's bodies and the nuances of it. And, all aspects of how that works. And look at the mental components. Like, can you read books? Can you learn more about positions? The emotional component, everything from bliss and love to fear and shame and how those factors come into play. The social components of what did you learn growing up that it needs to be a man or a woman or about sex, and what was your early sexual experiences and how are they still framing you now, and what, societal expectations do you carry? And then the spiritual component, which to me is very much about mindfulness and being present in the moment and present with your five senses and in tune with yourself and in tune with your partner and each other's pleasure. Like
can you talk a little bit? I don't want to interrupt you, but but I'm going to do it for the 1,000th time. Can you talk a little bit more about mindful sex? Because I did see that on your site. I did see that in one of the videos, and I think it's so important. Can you talk a little bit more about that concept?
I would love to, because that's at the core of all my work is mindfulness. And mindfulness meaning that idea of, the past has already happened and the future hasn't happened yet. And all we have is right now. But we are so often in our heads rehashing the past or worried about the future, or planning in some way or something, that we are missing this moment. And this moment has colors and it has smells and it has tastes and it has feel, and it has things to feel. And we have emotions going on and we have thoughts going on, but I like the analogy of a river. And that lack of mindfulness, which is kind of automatic pilot, is like we step into the river of our thoughts and get swept away. And mindfulness is learning how to step back on the shore and observe your thoughts, observe your emotions, observe what's happening in this moment without getting swept away with your thoughts or just triggered in emotions that just, start to snowball. And so it's learning how to be the observer self. And it's the number one tool I use for helping people break their patterns. Because unless we know how we're getting swept up in that river and then ending up downriver, and you're like, oh shit, how did I end up down here again? I don't want to be here. I'm not happy here. I shut down. I lashed out. I communicate when I wanted to. Like I smoked pot instead of addressing this conversation. I just spent 4 hours playing video games instead of, doing the work I said I was going to do. Like, how do I keep doing this? Well, we have to figure out what's triggering us in the first place. And so I teach people just basic tools of how do you step back on the shore. And it's by, you could tap into your five senses, or specifically by looking at, okay, what are my emotions in this moment? I give people a list of emotions to pick from. What are my thoughts with it? What are my belief systems? What does this mean to me? And then literally, where do I feel it in my body? Like that feeling like you've been punched in the gut, or like butterflies before public speaking, or anxiety in your chest, or like I have a couple men that have shared with me, like when they're feeling really angry, they get a buzzy headed or like fuzzy headed feeling.
Yep.
Another talked about how he feels his ears getting warm. Someone else talked about something in the back of his neck. Like all of that is fantastic bodily wisdom. And that when we could start paying attention to the nuances of it, we could start making different choices. So
that's awesome.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. I'm actually kind of blown away. I have nothing to say. That's really, really cool. And that's just so cool. I mean, I've never really thought of it that way. And I'm a relatively sensitive guy, and relatively, like, let's not get crazy here. But yeah, that's so cool. What, along those lines, I mean, all right, so if you had to give just some general simple advice for simple guys, what would you give them about this? What would you say? Well, if you could give any, if you could, any, for guys out there, what is something that we're missing and or you just give us clueless men something?
And I mean, and you mean specifically about like being sexual with women?
Yeah, whatever.
I mean, I would, if to give you something simple, I would say there's some great books out there actually that really take a very holistic approach to women's sexuality. And I mean, because I've had some couples that I work with, I've had both like male and female read books and then kind of mark different passages or ask each other questions. And particularly this one couple, both very much engineers, and particularly for the guy, hard for him to learn how to put himself in a woman's shoes.
Should give it to him in a spreadsheet.
What? Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Sorry, engineers. Just kidding.
It's interesting. And I do talk to him, like once we have ideas, then I'll give him homework in a 1, 2, 3 checklist type of way.
Right.
And while she may get frustrated sometimes and be like, well, I feel like he's just going through a checklist. I'm like, that's okay. Like that's how his brain works.
Right.
Let him learn this. Let him get some competence in this. Let him get some, skills and emotional awareness around this. And then he can make it his own and he can fine tune it to you. But like, this is our starting point and that's okay. And he's doing this because he loves you.
Right.
It may not feel natural. And, it feels contrived in that way, but don't judge him for that. Like this is, we're working with the strengths of his brain,
right?
So that he can learn it and then he can run, on his own with that.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's cool. That's super cool.
So, yeah.
Okay. So let me ask you, so I mean, it's just such cool stuff and such a cool topic. And I think it's so awesome. And I actually think it's really courageous for you to take on this role and be a leader in this area. So
thank you.
What's your why? Why are you doing this? Why do you do what you do? What inspires you?
Well, definitely, growing up a good girl, in Pennsylvania, like I said, it, like there's a lot of, like shame and fear and embarrassment in terms of being raised a Catholic good girl type of thing. And that feels shitty, and I don't feel like I got this from my parents. We didn't really talk about sex, but just in society or in sex education or through religion, it was so disempowering to me knowing my body. And I think about, I didn't even know about my clitoris and I was a late bloomer. I didn't have my first boyfriend till I was 17. And I didn't even know, like I had to learn from him that I had a clitoris and where it was. Like, that's fucking bullshit.
Yeah, that's craziness.
That's total bullshit.
That's craziness.
Yeah, that's like I mean, it's my body. Teach me about my body and the basics of it. And teach me how to be responsible with it. But gosh, don't disempower me by, disempowering me, but not even letting me know about it. So, I mean, that type of stuff is just infuriating. And then I joined the sexual health peer educators at Lehigh University when I was 20. Specifically because my roommate was doing it and I wanted public speaking skills. And I know. And I was
That's
like,
so great.
I had been afraid to raise my hand in class. I was always afraid of looking foolish. And I was like, oh, she's having a great time in this group. I'm a good girl. So I don't know about all of this, but, I just became fascinated about it. And we went around to the dorms and we did condom demonstrations and did workshops. And I really liked it. I mean, it's a fascinating topic. And I was specifically fascinated by gender differences and how we're raised to be really different and how men and women will talk about condom use differently. And that's what my dissertation ended up being on. So
what was your dissertation on?
It was on HIV prevention programs in New York State. And it looked at specifically female sexuality and how women negotiate condom use or don't and why, and how age and race and ethnicity and socioeconomic status and religion, all those factors come into play in educational approaches to these women and kind of what works and what doesn't. So
that's so cool.
Thank you. Yeah.
That's so cool.
I learned a ton. It was really fascinating. Yeah.
That's awesome. All right. So what would you tell, I don't know. See, this is a question I ask everybody, but I feel like you're so mature that you probably wouldn't change it much. But I'll ask anyway. What would you ask the 25-year-old version of yourself?
That's a cool question. I think, let's see.
Or what would you tell that person? What would you tell the 25-year-old version?
You know what? I was like a year or two into grad school at that point. The first thing that comes to mind is actually mindfulness, because I didn't learn about mindfulness. I didn't first hear the word till a little over 12 years ago when I moved to San Diego and I started going to meditation classes. And I can totally remember where I was sitting and where I was the first time I heard the word mindfulness and got it defined for me and was like, oh, this is fascinating. And that's what really, that has, when people, and I have women that come to me or friends or other people or when I talk to college students or whatever, they're like, I want to be like you. I want to have what you have, the genuine confidence and self-love. And they're like, where does that come from? I had a fantastic upbringing, so I'm super lucky around that. And in terms of my personal growth around it, it was mindfulness. It was cultivating mindfulness so that I could learn to love myself deeply, so I could learn to, have better control over my reactions, so I could be prouder of myself, have better emotional awareness and articulation, and sit with, icky feelings and breathe through them and then do something different. So I think so it wasn't until I was maybe 30, I think, that I first learned about mindfulness. So if I had learned it at 25, that would be 5 years more. Right. And that definitely would have helped me through graduate school. Was difficult and alienating. And it took me forever to finish my dissertation and just felt shame and guilt around that. And
so you think mindfulness helped? Because that's really interesting. So you think mindfulness really is something that really was the driver for you and how you are now? Because I've seen you, we're doing this podcast, but I've seen you in both social situations. I've seen you in the, in board meetings, and you really are. You're very confident. You seem extremely comfortable with who you are, which I think is so rare, especially where we live, where everybody's good looking and, just symbols of status are everywhere. You're very comfortable with who, or you seem to be extremely comfortable with who you are.
And I'm so happy to hear it comes off that way. And because it's not like, I'm not bullshitting. It's not a facade. And again, like, I've got my insecurities. I've got, I mentioned some body image that pops up for me sometimes. Like I've got stuff like that, but mindfulness has helped me own all of my shit. And when I own it, then I shine a bright light on it and I can look at it, and not in a way of beating myself up, but like, okay, so this doesn't feel good. How can I take care of myself and do something different with that? And that is so empowering. It makes me feel it's resiliency building. And it means, I feel genuinely confident. I will tell you one thing I am not confident about, to link it back to my black belt testing in a week and a half. We have to do a spinning, jumping back kick and break 2 boards.
What?
And I am not good at that. And
that sounds really hard.
it's shitty, and many people are just fine with it. I do not. I have lots of injuries. I have lots of joint problems. My joints shift out of their sockets. I have a lot of some physical stuff like that, and I generally just push through it. But so anyway, it's just that's on my mind recently because I'm like talking.
You're gonna kill it. You're probably gonna break through those boards.
That's what everybody keeps saying to me. They're like, "Oh, and I'm like, no, you don't understand," because I think they think I'm just not confident or I don't value myself or have faith in myself. I was like, no, I'm good in all of those areas, but I also own my limitations and my weaknesses and recognize them. Yeah. And this is a big one that I'm like coming face to face with. So
I think you're gonna kill it. I do. And I don't think, and I'm not saying that, like, I don't think that you're not confident or whatever. I actually just think you'll be able to do it. I just think you'll do it. I mean, I just get vibes on stuff, and I think the vibe on that is just like, hey, guess what? She's probably gonna break the board, and 5 guys are gonna ask her out before the boards hit the ground. That would be my guess, but what do I know?
I want to live in your world that you have.
Oh my God, my world is crazy. My world is crazy awesome, but there's a lot of tank tops, there's a lot of fish tacos, a lot of 80s music, and there's a lot of and there's a lot of like 3 women looking at me like, is my dad or / my husband absolutely crazy? There's a lot of like, this is my dad, or wow, this is the dude I married. And it's like, you got it, ladies. I am he. Congratulations. You must have done something in a previous life to land me.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty funny. Okay, so we're coming to the end here, but so any other final thoughts for our listeners? Can you tell us, and also tell us where we can find you online and wherever else?
Yeah, I would love to, because I mean, in particular, folks, if my approach to things, my different approach to sex and relationships and intimacy resonates with folks, like, please follow me online. Please share. Like I do this. Well, you ask why I do this. And I do this because I'm just, like I said, getting past growing up being a good girl, but I am passionate about these topics. Sex and intimacy, it's ingrained our everyday lives, whether we want it to be or not.
Right. And
it behooves us not to try to feel more empowered about it, even when the cards are stacked against us, particularly as many women feel about it. And so it is my mission and purpose in life to serve in this area and to help people feel healthier and happier and more satisfied in their sex lives. And so my main hub for stuff online is my website, drjensden.com.
Okay.
But also, I mean, I'm on, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Pinterest, Instagram. All of those are at Dr. Jen's Den.
I'm going to put all that stuff on the show notes so everybody can.
That would be awesome.
And I gotta say one thing about what you just said is, you said you're very passionate about, sex and intimacy. And I think the difference is like, you're passionate about it, but you're also one of the few people who has the guts to talk about it. Because I think many of us are actually passionate about it, but everyone's scared to death to talk about it or to do anything about it. And you're actually one of the few people who's like, hey man, I'm willing to talk about it and I'm going to go, put myself out there. I mean, I just think that that's so cool. And I know I've said that like a thousand times, but I mean, I just think it's so great that you can do it, because I think you're such a great example, not just for people in relationships, but you're such a great example for women, and you're just such a great example for men in the sense that, you can be open and honest and have a healthy relationship and do all these things, and it can be fun, and it doesn't have to be, what society says it should be, and it can be even better than that.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
You're welcome. And by far, right? Like anytime you go to a cocktail party, you have to be the most interesting person, right? Like you must be the most popular person. Like if I'm going to a cocktail party and I'm like, hey, nice to meet you, Jen. What do you do? And you're like, I'm a sexologist. And I talk to, hey, John, what are you doing? He's like, I'm a lawyer. Well, guess who I'm going to talk to? I mean,
people have said to me, because they'll like turn to their friends and be like, where'd you find her? I want to invite her to my parties.
Right? I mean, I'm going to invite you to all our parties, but you might be bored out of your mind because it's a bunch of kids left.
Yeah, that's not my forte.
It's so great. Anyway, well, thank you so much for being on the show. This was fantastic. We'll have you on again in the future. And everyone, I will put all of Jen's stuff, Dr. Jen's stuff, in the show notes. And you can get her at her website in the den with Dr. Jenn and on YouTube. And thank you so much for hanging out and listening. You can always check out the site, jimsimcoe.com. And we appreciate you listening. Thanks for checking out the Make Life Epic podcast. Check us out online at makelifeepic.com. And I hope you have a fantastic day. Look forward to talking to you soon.